The taxicab is a part of the American mythos. The drunk, the late, the carless, and the non-driving have depended on the cab as a connector to other ways of life for more than 100 years. The spirit of the cab is grossly independent, a driver, a dispatcher, and the open road of possible fares. Never mind that actual cab driving is a brutal, extractive activity where the average cabbie is scraping to get by. The point is the idea. To drive a cab is to live a dream. The most important taxi video game ever released embodies this fantasy. It's called Crazy Taxi, and it appeared in arcades at the end of history. Communism had fallen, the world economy was booming, and you could slam the absolute shit out of the gas pedal in a Crazy Taxi cabinet at your local Aladdin's castle in the mall. Crazy Taxi is an apex video game because it clearly exists to take advantage of the madcap energy of the arcade. It's loud. Every person who plays it sounds like they're actively attempting to break the machine. You hammer on the gas and brake, both of which slam to the floor, and you drive around picking up passengers. Like in a real cab, you take them where they want to go. The virtual cities are full of other vehicles and human beings, all of which you will inevitably drive into because the wheel, gas, and brake barely work. They're complete dog shit. It feels like you're driving a bar of soap down a freeway in the rain. You deliver a couple people, your time runs out, and then you have to feed more quarters into the machine. This was fun in 1999. The Crazy Taxi formula has not been improved on in the intervening 25 years. More importantly, it has barely been iterated on. Its taxi driving system is one of the few game mechanics that human beings looked at and thought, well, that's perfect, and decided to stay away from, for fear of sullying something special. And I guess another way of looking at it is that people don't think driving a taxi is very interesting, despite how clearly the taxi is lodged into our mythology as a culture. But now, in this moment, after the streets have been Uberfied and the liftification of our economy has occurred, as the taxi driver is pushed out of its natural habitat, it seems that we are prepared to revisit what it means to drive a taxi in a video game again. Not as a side quest in a Grand Theft Auto game, but as a true documentary experience that gets to the heart of taxi truths and the American spirit. I'm therefore infuriated to admit that the brave new world of taxi video gaming has been delivered to us by an Italian development team, Panic Arcade. Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom is billed as a combination of Super Mario 64 and Crazy Taxi, but I want to let you in on a little secret. I don't like a Mario. I have no use for a Mario. You cannot pay me to collect a star, and I believe that in my heart, if I were asked to collect 120 stars, that I would die. I believe that it would kill me. I believe that I would be reduced to dust and punished for my sins by some kind of distant god, and I don't collect stars, and I remain immune to the pull of collecting anything. That was the secret. But what you're watching right now is me spending several minutes attempting to correctly implement a solution to a button puzzle so that I can collect all 3 green gears in this arcade level of this taxi game. It was a struggle. I went through all the stages of grief on this one, peaking with anger and eventually moving on to acceptance and then victory, which is often referred to as the bonus round of grief. And I admit that it is hard for me to square the circle of my immunity to collectability and why I bothered doing that puzzle. I think it has to do with the weird flavors of Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom. So here's how the game plays. You drive a taxi in a timed environment like Crazy Taxi. In some levels, you pick people up and take them where they're going, learning a little bit about the world that they live in. For example, there's a world where an underclass of pizza people are being delivered to pizza restaurants, packaged into pizza boxes, and then sent out to be eaten by other denizens who might or might not be pizzas themselves. They live and breathe, they think and speak, and it's deeply disturbing. Part of the experience of the game is just attempting to take it all in, being that each level is jam-packed with pedestrians and giant creatures dancing in the distance and navigable terrain to tear ass around in. It's bright and colorful, and each level manages to be very distinct from each other in order to make it clear that you're moving through a weird, semi-coherent world that's very different from our own. The attention to detail in that weirdness is often striking, and it makes the timed worlds where you need to perform taxi duties into an excuse to explore, not a job. You also collect coins and gears and do some platforming like in Mario 64, where these two things, Mario 64 and Crazy Taxi, run into each other, creates a really interesting friction. After all, taxis can't jump like Mario can, living balletically above humanity and his sky castles and painted worlds. Taxi cabs are of the earth. They're meat and potatoes, salt of the earth, Travis Bickle shit. What they can do, like in the classic KC Green comic, is ramp it. You face your cab near an angle, you hit the boost button, and hope to hell that you can maneuver well enough in the air to get what you want. If you see something you want to get, like a big green gear, your best option is to figure out how to ramp and boost your way there using level geometry or houses or pedestrians or people or fire hydrants or enemies. I never felt like there was an optimal move I could make in the game, or that positioning and predictability were my friends. Every time I would launch this little vehicle into the air, I was doing it on faith, and more than 50% of the time it worked out, sort of. These mechanics, some of the most frictional, least convenient, least easy systems of platforming that I've ever encountered in a game. And maybe that's also why it's some of the most engaging. Underneath all the taxi stuff and the weird people and the Elon Musk Dr. Wily villainy, there's a real commitment to hard-ass platforming. Most importantly, it's not for your benefit. You can get better at it, maybe, I guess. But there's also no sense of betterment as a person. There's no Dark Souls fantasy of personal improvement where I'm changing my life and overcoming obstacles. As you play the game, you learn that you can honk on your head and do some weird flips and generally fiddle with the platforming controls, but at the bottom of all this, you're playing a clockwork taxi that can't corner for shit, and much like the Crazy Taxi itself, has some soap-like qualities, to put it kindly. What's most special about Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom is that it can get me to do all these things. It can get me to come back in, over and over, in a way that most video games cannot lure me. I am not an adherent of sticky frictions or noodling puzzles. I like a goal, and by God, I like a plot. Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom is strung together with an NES story full of punny names and meta jokes, and I'll even forgive that, against my better judgment, if only because I am deeply interested in constantly rocketing to new heights and attaining better modes of control for this little motoring creature. When you fail, what you mostly lose is time, but that's not nothing. Some of the levels are timed, and losing time is worse than a simple life loss or one of 3 little taxi heads going away. You have to drive around again. You gotta find your launch point. You gotta run it back, see if you can hit the little thing in the sky that you've been aiming for. And I'm driven to do that, against my better wishes, because that damn green gear is staring me in the face. In the real world, there's risk in a taxi. We put our lives in other people's hands constantly in every social system we live in, but there's a certain directness when you get into a taxi. About 10 years ago, I got into a taxi, and 3 minutes or so into the ride, I realized the driver was completely hammered. He was weaving all over the center line of the road, swerving to avoid potholes, just doing his thing to get us there in the best way that he knew how. Strangely, at that moment, I wasn't really worried about my own well-being. I just thought this was how things went for some reason and sat through the experience. This is what taxis are about, I thought. This is the world we live in. This is how we get through the day. Now, I did get where I was going in one piece, but my relative willingness to accept that my life was wholly in the hands of this drunk fella gives me pause these many years later. I was trapped in a metal cage, barreling down the highway at 65 miles an hour. And isn't that just the perfect metaphor for life? You know, people at the wheel. But my God, do they have your best interests in mind? And you're definitely not getting out of this thing alive. So you just kind of sit there and it all keeps happening until it doesn't happen anymore. Anyway, sometimes you get attacked by little cars that are possessed in Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom, and that's a neat part of the game. Great game, 5 stars.